to use advanced chip making equipment to develop a solid state capacitor with enough energy density to get 250 miles of range in a car. So, and the idea was that if you can piggyback on the process on advanced chip making processes where there's like tens of billions of dollars of R&D being spent every year to have to make chips that are precise at the molecular level, then maybe you can make a capacitor where you've got enough surface to volume ratio, and you can stop the electrons from tunneling across. If you make the sort of insulator too thin, that you'll actually quantum mechanics will make them teleport across, which is so it's not like things get weird at a molecular scale. Quantum mechanics is very weird. It's like my quantum mechanics course in physics in final year was harder than all of my other courses combined.
Wow.
So it's like it's intense.
What's your outlook on solid state? Do you think it'll ever get figured out?
Well, the solid state capacitors?
Yeah.
I think it's possible to make capacitors that are much better than what we have right now. And actually, I don't want to use the word graphene because it's used in bullshit context so often, but graphene may be an interesting, present an interesting avenue into creating a high energy density capacitor. So, like that could you'd have to have a lot of layers, and what you need is like something that is extremely resistant to electrons jumping the gap. So you need a great conductor, but also like effectively something that will basically drop the probability of an electron jumping the insulator to a low number. It will still not going to be zero, but it needs to be a low number. Otherwise, your leakage current is going to be too high.
Let's just start with small problems like teleporting electrons.
When electrons are doing the world is crazy at a molecular scale. The world is just like you cannot apply your normal intuition. So I think it gets super weird.
Spooky at a distance is what I've heard it called very, very well.
It's incredibly predictable from a probability standpoint. The quantum mechanics has unbelievable predictability. You just have to believe what it tells you, even though what it tells you doesn't seem to make sense at a macro scale. But anyway, I think there's an opportunity out there to have a very high energy density capacitor. But that was the idea that's the idea that I had back then. But that's not to say that idea would have succeeded. The thing I could have found out after several years was I could have added some knowledge, like some leaves to the tree of knowledge, only to and get the PhD, but not, actually not practical. After all that,
we learned something and learned that this branch ended here. Maybe.
Yeah. So like one of the possible outcomes, a strong possibility would be, you spent all this time. This is not technically something that would work, but it is commercially not feasible and a waste of time.
Yeah.
And that would suck basically. So I figured that I could always. So that's why I decided in '95 to work on the internet. So like when I was in college, I was trying to think of like what are the things that would most affect the future of humanity. Yeah.
So obviously you pursued multiple of those like choices, right? What would you say, like when you first joined Tesla, like everyone thinks that you weren't the founder of, everyone tries to correct you on that. He didn't found it. Like what did it actually consist of, right? Because I think a lot of people just think that someone else started it, you joined later and whatever, but obviously that's not true. So
that is not true. The reason people think that is because Everhard has engaged in a nonstop campaign to try to effectively gain sole credit for Tesla for himself. And he's the worst person I have ever worked with, and that is saying something. Okay, I've worked with some real assholes. Okay, so for somebody to be the worst person I have ever worked with, by far, that's not easy, is what I'm saying. So the actual origin of Tesla goes to 2003 when I had lunch with JV in El Segundo, and we got to talking about electric cars, and JV said, hey, have you tried the AC propulsion T0? I said, no, but we talked about battery technology and how the lithium ion would finally enable a long range car. I never heard of Eberhard at this point. Never heard of him. So then I got a test drive from AC Propulsion T0, and I was like, wow, okay, this is pretty cool. So at first I was like, well, can you guys just make me a T0? I'll buy one from you. And they didn't want to make another one. So I was like, okay. And I said, you guys should really commercialize the T0, because the T0 had all the properties that we later had in the Roadster. You know, it's sort of like 250-mile range, 0 to 60 under 4 seconds, or roughly 4 seconds. And it was a two-door, well, it didn't have doors, admittedly, the T0. But it looks, you can see a resemblance between the T0 and the Roadster. It's basically a small electric sports car. And so I was trying to convince the guys there to like commercialize the T0. It's like, hey, the world needs to see that it's possible to have a viable electric car. And at the time, I was obviously very much, working crazy hours at SpaceX trying to get a rocket to orbit, and we'd not yet reached orbit. So we'd not reached orbit until 2008 for SpaceX. So anyway, so then I kept hounding AC Propulsion to commercialize the T0. And then weirdly, they wanted to not do the T0, but do an electric Toyota Scion. Like truth is stranger than fiction. So I'm like, guys,
with hamsters dancing too.
I mean, the thing is, like, the batteries and powertrain at low volume are going to be very expensive, and so like no matter what, you would have to have like maybe a $70,000 or $80,000 electric Scion, or you could have, for argument's sake, $100,000 electric sports car. And people are willing to pay $100,000 for an electric sports car, but they are not willing to pay, let's say, $80,000. Like, you'd only save a small amount, because the battery pack and electric powertrain are overwhelmingly what is expensive. But I even said, listen, if you guys actually want to do an electric Scion, I will fund 10% of it, but you have to find other people who will fund the other 90%. And the only people who are willing to do 10% were me and Sergey Brin. And so then that project stalled. So then I sent I think it's Tom Gage an email saying, like, listen, if you guys are sure that you don't want to commercialize the T0, how about if you let me do that? So I was like, I'm going to start a company to commercialize the T0. So then Dan said, well, if you're interested in commercializing T0, he knows 2 other groups that are also interested in doing it, and would I like to meet them? I never met the second group, but the first group I met was Eberhard, Tarpening, and Wright. Now, Eberhard keeps trying to erase Ian Wright from history as well, because they hate each other. Okay. But all they had was just basically, the plan was commercialized. There were no employees, there were no offices, there was no IP, there was no nothing, literally nothing. Yep. There was nothing you would call a company. He said, like, where is the company? I don't know, where is it? There was an empty shell corporation that had 0 value, and no employees, no offices, no designs, no intellectual property, no nothing. Except the general idea, basically, of commercializing the T0, which I had before meeting them. Like, if I had not met them, I would have just moved forward, created a company with JB, commercialized the T0, and gone on our way. And that's actually what happened at the end of the day.
Oh my gosh.
Except with a lot of grief along the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but in effect, after about a year, Martin Eberhard and Ian Wright could not stand each other, and they made me pick which one would leave. Basically, they can't both be in the same company, so I have to pick one of them. And then I talked to JB, and I was like, what's our least bad option here?
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, we'll say goodbye to Ian Wright and keep Martin. I mean, but anyway, like the key, I think the key point here is when somebody says like you're invested in a company, it's the money that I provided was the least important thing that I provided to the company. There was no company.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had not met them, I would have just moved forward and created Tesla, and I think it would be indistinguishable from what it is today. You would not be able to tell the difference. I think we could have avoided a lot of drama as well in the early days. So, yeah. I would, like, if there's one thing I could go back in time and say, I wish I had never met Martin Eberhard.
So if you could go back in
He's
time.
the absolute worst.
Yeah.
In case I haven't made that clear.
Yeah, clear.
The worst. The worst.
May I ask?
Don't ever, he's like, yes.
May
The
I
worst.
ask? I know Kelvin.
Someone who claims credit for things he didn't do and is obnoxious about it.
Yeah, so clearly if you had a time machine, you can go back in time and not work with him.
Yes,
and
fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
That would have, of course, saved a tremendous amount of anguish.
Yeah, and then just partner up with JB. The name Tesla and the logo means so much to so many of the fans of the cars. So help us understand who came up with the name Tesla and what were some of the alternatives, and would Tesla be called Tesla had you and JB broke out together and not met Martin?
So the Tesla Motors, which is what it was called at the time, was the trademark was actually held by a guy I think who lived around Sacramento or something, and the trademark Tesla Motors was like I said, owned by someone not us. So in the beginning it actually seemed like we would not be able to use. So you said like who came up with the Tesla Motors? The guy that we bought the trademark from, that guy. Not only did he come up with it, he trademarked it.
Oh.
Okay, so and we could not. He would not respond to anyone, any contact. So then finally, I sent Mark Topping, who is although he's Martin's best friend, is still a super nice guy, so I sent Mark Topping to sit on the guy's doorstep and not leave until we got the Tesla Motors trademark. So that's who came up with that. I forget his name, but it's in the trademark. You can look up the trademark history. That's who came up with Tesla Motors. That guy.
But you liked the name so much that you insisted that you sent Mark to sit on his doorstep, right? So
yeah. Anyway, I think we paid $75,000 for the trademark, which was a lot at that time.
Yeah, sure.
So, and I think it's also maybe important to emphasize, like, Martin Eberhard is quite a bit older than me and had successful startups before me and had a lot of money. He was just unwilling to risk it. He was not poor. He had a $10 million house in Woodside. Okay. He was just unwilling to risk his own money. I was not. I was willing to risk my own money. And in the end, I risked it all. So just important to emphasize, this is not like some poor inventor who gets crushed by big capitalist, which is the archetype that he tries to portray. He could have matched my investment if he wanted to. He just didn't want to.
At what point, through that, right, did you start to see the red flags, right? So you join with him, he's on board. Where's like? I
convinced JB to join. So the ultimate path that I wish we had gone on was just if AC Repulsion hadn't mentioned that there were two other teams interested in commercializing the T0, then I would have just moved forward with JB, commercialized the T0 with a hell of a lot less drama. That's the path that I wish had occurred. The moral error that I made here is that I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. So I was like, okay, I need to do SpaceX, but I also really want to do an electric car company. How can I have my cake and eat it too?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if I have someone else run the car company and I will just be responsible for the overall sort of technology and design, like the product side of things. Like the thing that I enjoy doing is the product side of things, not being the boss. I don't like being the boss at all, but I like engineering and design problems.
Mhm.
So, um, so I thought, okay, I'll just work on the stuff that I like doing, which is product design, and then someone else can be CEO and deal with all the chores of being a CEO. This unfortunately did not work.
No, 'cause you had a CEO in place. It didn't work out.
Well, no, yeah. Um, yeah, things finally came to a head in mid 2007, where Martin just flat out lied to me about the cost and readiness of the car, and I actually gave him an opportunity. I said, Martin, what is the cost of goods of the car? Like, how much is it? Like, what are we tracking to? And is it above the price that we are charging? And I actually knew the answer because an investor had joined who had audited the costs, and that investor told me, like, hey man, the numbers he's adding up for the best case long-term cost of the Roadster is $180,000. I think we were like selling it for $85,000.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's like
Huge.
yeah, you can't make it up on volume.
Yeah.
Losing money, we're gonna make it up in scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rivian has that problem right now.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
so basically I was like, well, this is extremely messed up. And he also said that like about the sort of new investor came in said that about a third of the car works, about a third of the car is super late, and a third of it will never work at all.
Oh.
I'm like, okay, this is pretty bad. So I called Martin and said, like, Martin, what's the cost of the car? And he said he didn't know. So like, okay, he's flat out lying to me. Because I asked, did you tell Martin this? And he said, yes, I told Martin this. So when I then called Martin and said, what's the cost of the car, Martin? Oh, I don't know. Are you sure? and when he did boldface lied to me, I was like, that's it. You know, he can't be CEO anymore. So we had a board meeting, and we fired him unanimously, including the people that he had appointed to the board.
Wow.
And at the time, we did not know the full extent of the situation. So we kept him on, like he was in the company, but fired as of July of 2007. And then I still didn't want to be CEO of the company, so I got like an interim CEO. But I was effectively, it's fair to say I was de facto CEO from July 2007 because in bringing in an interim CEO, this interim CEO did not know anything about cars. So I had to basically increase my time allocation to Tesla and help the new CEO figure things out. And this is all happening as we're sort of progressing into 2008. And then, I mean, I so badly didn't want to be CEO. Like to be clear, I could have been CEO from day one. It's not like I was like, I had like majority ownership on day one.
Yeah.
Yourself, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm now CEO. If I wanted to be CEO, I could have just made myself the CEO anytime I want. There's no need for any machinations or Machiavellian anything. I just could say, I vote me CEO, end of story.
Yeah.
So it's because I was trying to not be the CEO that things became problematic.
Yeah.
So we had an interim CEO for a few months, and then we did a CEO search in 2007, and the only person who was willing to say yes was Zev Drory. I don't know if you guys remember anything about Zev Drory. All right. So Zev is I like Zev actually. Let's just say, like, he is fearless. So the only person who would agree to be CEO of Tesla was a guy who spent 3 years in the Israeli paratroopers and was afraid of nothing. So Zev joined as CEO, but he, from a personality standpoint, his personality did not mesh well with the rest of the team. So After about 6 months of Zev being CEO and me being de facto co-CEO, because again, he didn't know anything about electric cars really. He was a technology guy from the chip industry. The team kind of had a revolt. Basically, they said, "Look, if